of those, stickler for measurements, accuracy, let's do this right or let's don't do it at all. He has a super series of postcards. He does tremendous artwork of the road and has designed the Rudy logo for the run to the Heartland. And here he is, Jerry McClanahan.
Take kind of that box up. Yeah. Make you a little green. And I live in Texas where everything's supposed to be big. Yeah, right. I just want to say that the best part about being here is putting faces to names that I've known before only through phone calls or letters or seeing their products or their names in the magazine. And then seeing people I've seen along the route getting here, people from Wisconsin, people from Canada and all that. It's just been real great. Glad to meet all of y'all and hope we get to visit again before it's over. Thank you.
Did Robert Ballmeyer ever wake up? I think he worked all night painting on my mural over here. So we'll say a word about him. We'll save his belt buckle and give it to him later. All right, Robert has, of course, done the math on Route 66. He has 44 different postcards on Route 66. He's in the process right now of restoring a general store on Hackberry, Arizona, making it an information center for Route 66. And as far as we're concerned, Robert Walmar is a legend in his own time. Tom T. '66 enthusiast. He's a drummer for Asleep at the Wheel. He's got a tape out and a CD on music from the All-American Highway, and he has a new CD that he's going to be released today, I understand, and maybe he wants to say something about it.
Well, thank you, George. First of all, at about a couple hours, we're going to go take a little caravan and buy some lottery tickets because I'm feeling kind of lucky. The first place, when I made my tape about Route 66, I thought it was just a good idea and a nice theme for an album. The first place I came to sell the tape was right here at George's store. And I stayed here for 4 hours talking with George and Melba, and it just happened that Bob Waldmeyer was here, and all of a sudden I thought maybe I've hit upon something that I didn't know was around, and that is sort of the Route 66 family that I have met since I've put out my tape, and it's an amazing compliment to do something, and it's sort of taking on a life of its own. There's people to go with the product, if you know what I mean. You know, it's not just a Route 66 t-shirt, it's the person wearing it. And that's what's amazed me about the whole Route 66 family. And I'm glad to be here, and I'm honored that I've been invited. And as far as actually, probably more important than the new record I'm releasing, one of the acts from the Songs of Route 66, Alan Rohde, is here. He's a songwriter from Nashville. And he'll be performing. I don't know what time he'll be performing yet, but sometime this afternoon. And I think that probably has more bearing on today's celebration, and I hope everyone has a great time today. Thanks.
I would like to recognize that I do have some of my other directors here from Missouri. I have Tom Pike, Vice President, and his wife Glenda, Ada Moore, I guess she's down at the booth, and Jane Dipple. Also, I've noticed about 10 or so members of the Missouri Association that have been walking around here. So I'd like to thank them for coming and all of you for appearing. And also, in deference to George's comment about Paul's comment about this being a one-time happening, in 2001 will be the 75th anniversary. I think we ought to start working for that and have plans for it starting to propagate now for a 75th reunion. Thank you, have a good time, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you. I'm sorry about the group there.
It's hard. Publisher, the chili cook-off person, the Route 66 roadie to share with you. Just to let you know that just as Marion Clark is getting ready to introduce a new cookbook that features the new on Route 66, I would like to tell you today that there are some of us still out here that are trying to keep the road alive and still have the same feelings in our heart for Route 66 that those did in 1926. We had a young couple come in here, 3 small children. No money, no food, a borrowed pickup, a small, frail boy who looked like he was probably about 8 years old, turned out to be almost 12. This child had a bad illness, and they were trying to work their way to Utah to get this child surgery by selling rocks. I was in the entryway on my hands and knees waxing the floor, and all of a sudden this young man is between my face and the wall, and he said, "Would you like to buy some of these rocks?" And I said, "Well, what are they?" "Well, they're fine crystal." And he told me his story and their problem. I thought about it a few minutes, and I told him, I said, "You know, we really don't have much outlet in here for rocks. But what else can I do for you?" And he said, well, he just was trying to earn some money so he could feed his children. And I said, "How many of you are there?" He said, "My wife and I have 3 sons." I said, "Find a table." The children ordered what they wished. The parents refused to eat. They were not here for charity. But then the children refused to eat because Mom and Dad weren't eating. So the parents were fed too. We had already insisted, but there was a lot of pride in that struggling young family. When we saw that they were down to about 1/4 of a plate, and the children were still eating with as much enthusiasm as they were when they were first served, we went back to the kitchen. And in a few minutes, a platter of all the foods that they had ordered was set before them. And I guarantee you they had a feast on Route 66. Now, I asked them to let us know how it worked out. We have lots of folks through here in this sort of condition. We try our best to help every one of them. Some of them we hear from, some of them we don't. It doesn't matter. We've done what we could do. But I think of that family every once in a while, and especially of that little boy and his outcome, and how he is today, and if he'll soon be the height and the weight of any other normal 12-year-old boy. But before they left, that man told me, he said, "My mother always told me that throughout my life out there, we all have a guardian angel." And he said, "I have always sort of had this feeling of a extrasensory perception." And he said, "When I saw you on your hands and knees, I knew you were my guardian angel." And he gave me his prize box of rocks. Thanks.
Wallis and Suzanne Wallis. I know in the past they've been Mr. and Mrs. Route 66, but in the 90s, this is Mr. and Mrs. Route 66. All right. She wants to say a few words here.
I'm going to get this done before Mike gets started. That's a long-windedest man. He told us last night we might have a baptism. I tell you what, he's currently working on a non-fictional book on the history and of the legendary 101 Range. His earlier works include Beyond the Hills, Journey of Wade Phillips, and Way Down Yonder in the Indian Nation. How about that? And Story of Frank Phillips, and has also co-authored Song Dog Diary, 66 Stories from the Road, along with his wife, Suzanne Fitzgerald Wallis. And they also co-edited Greetings from the Mother Road. They have done Route 66 postcards. It's just amazing and unbelievable, the talent of this man. I'm going to tell his age. He's born 1945. Oh, he's getting old. He moved to Miami, Florida in 1978 and spent 21 months there as a correspondent in the Time Caribbean Bureau. He's won many, many awards, including the 1994 Lynn Riggs Award from Rogers State College in Claremore. In 1994, he was an inductee into the Oklahoma Route 66 Hall of Fame. Michael's work's been nominated for National Book Awards and on 3 occasions for the Pulitzer Prize. Since 1982, Michael and Susan have made their home in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And as a matter of fact, last night, Michael was the first recipient of the John Steinbeck Award, and we are privileged and honored to be on the stage with this man today, Michael Wallis.
Michael, I do have a belt buckle for you. I did cheat a little bit on this one. And I wanted to keep this one, but I decided it had to be yours. This is number 1. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Let's see if these pipes of mine will carry out. I think they will. The one thing I did get out of the Marine Corps was a pretty good set of pipes. So I don't think you'll have any trouble hearing me today. I'll tell you what, I've appeared with a lot of different people. People a lot, certainly better writers than me and more thoughtful and creative, and tried to shine right along with them. But I guarantee you, I just got myself gunned down right now. And I don't know about you all, but there's the best story you're going to hear today was the one you just heard from Melba. You know, and if anybody's got a tinge of cynicism in their heart out there, I hope it melted when you heard that story right out of her heart. Everybody talks about this book I wrote and was lucky to have good timing on about Route 66, the Mother Road. Well, that book's a fine book, and it's one of many fine books. There's so many good ones. But the best words in that book of mine aren't ones I wrote. They're the stories. That's the story of Angel Delgadillo. Those are Angel's words. They're not mine. You've got to get people to open their hearts to you, open their souls to you, and let you peer in. That's what Angel did, and that's what this woman did with that story. That's the best gift you could have gotten this whole weekend, is that one story. That's what I was trying to explain to you last night about angels in disguise. And there are sure a lot of them out there on this road. Well, greetings, road warriors. I'm so glad to be here. The 70th birthday shindig in behalf of our favorite path, Route 66, the Mother Road, America's Main Street, the Will Rogers Highway, the Free Road. We've gathered here from east, from west, north, south, all points, from the land of Lincoln, from sunny California, from throughout the Midwest and Southwest, from so many states and foreign lands, to celebrate the first 70 years of Route 66. There are people here from Elk City, where they're going to build a new Route 66 museum. There are good, tried and true road warriors here from the New Mexico Association, which is rising like a phoenix from the ashes. There are people here from Western Europe, from Denmark, from all over the place, come right here for this special moment to mark this very special date. 70 years young. Longfellow said that to be 70 is like climbing the Alps. You reach a snow-covered summit and see behind you the deep valley stretching miles and miles away, and before you other summits and wider, which you may have the strength to climb or you may not, and then you sit down and you meditate and wonder which it will be. Now, another esteemed American of letters, old Ralph Waldo Emerson, took a little more jaundiced view of the mood at 70. And Emerson wrote, "The man and woman of 70 assume to know all. They have outlived their hope. They renounce aspiration, accept the actual for the necessary, and talk down to the young." But we're not going to let that fate befall our beloved highway, are we? We're not going to permit old Route 66 to become like some cranky, mean-spirited old man and woman. We're not going to let it age bad at 70. In order to do that, all I want to do up here today is kind of challenge you to put up your guard a little bit. Be on the defense of all you road warriors. Guard against reducing this wonderful, splendid, pure Route 66 revival movement to petty politics, to bitter infighting between factions, between regions and states, between organizations and associations. We've got to work together. We've got to pull together. Don't hold anything in your heart about David Knutson. Don't hold anything in your heart about Paul Taylor. What's good for Elk City is good for Clinton. What's good for Rolla is good for Tucumcari. What's good for Pontiac, Illinois is good for Santa Rosa. What benefits St. James, Missouri, benefits Hackberry, Arizona. We're all in this together, so please, please, let's stop from this day forward any and all bickering, sniping, petty criticisms. Let's work in unison for the cause. It's my hope that this very historic gathering of road warriors is going to act as a bridge to the future, to the next 70 years, and far, far beyond for Route 66. Like so many of us today that are gathered here, this venerable old road stays alive because we truly realize it is one long village. It stretches from Lake Michigan at Chicago across 2/3 of this continent until it finally ends at the Pacific beaches of Santa Monica. And along the way, those of us who are lucky enough to live on the route or near it or else travel the various alignments have become familiar with the very diverse and distinctive neighborhoods that make up this linear village called 66. Now, sometimes these neighborhoods, let me tell you, are rough and tumble. Sometimes they're as quiet and tranquil as a country bone orchard. But one thing they never are is predictable. Now, that's one word that should never be associated with Route 66, predictable. There's nothing predictable about it. And those of you who journeyed here this weekend from the far west and points above, from California and Arizona and certainly New Mexico, you passed through some of our favorite neighborhoods, through some of these best Route 66 locales. One of these spots out west, not far from the New Mexico-Arizona border, is the town of Gallup. I don't know if anybody's here today from Gallup, the Indian capital of the world. Now, not too long ago, during one of the many tours that Suzanne and I are privileged and honored to lead for the Smithsonian Institution, we paused for a night in Gallup. And the next morning, I scribbled down on some old paper a few Sunday morning thoughts, and I was fortunate to recently find those scribblings of mine, and I thought I'd share them with you today to sort of salute here at the midpoint our neighbors to the west. And here's that reminiscent. Early Sabbath in Gallup. It's dark and cool and only a fingernail of high desert moon and gaudy ribbons of neon to light my path. I leave El Rancho and my sleeping pals and move westward on my mother road. With each stride, I feel better. I pass gas stations, the laundry, empty lots, derelict buildings, the esteemed Indian pawn shops, and inside these shops, behind the steel bars, are people's lives in the form of silver and turquoise, fetishes, kachinas, blankets, saddles intact, carbine rifles, concho belts, and trinkets for the touristas. I glance inside the quiet cafe and spy the long, smooth counter and empty booths. In the air, there's a hint of diesel mixing with the kitchen aromas from an all-night greasy spoon. My pace cars this early morning are big Santa Fe train engines. They bellow and snort and roll eastward, hauling long lines of freight. Junkyard dogs serenade me. And when I circle back to the hotel, all of Gallup passes in review. And at my feet, between the cyclone fence and the steel rails of the Santa Fe, I see platoons of dead soldiers. Empty Tokade wine and cheap whiskey bottles, beer cans, New Mexico survival kits, revealed by the glint of neon and streetlight. And under my breath, I curse the disease as deadly as plague, as deadly as cholera that strikes these fine people native to this land I love. I curse the cruel men in iron who long ago forced the sword and cross upon them. I curse the well-meaning but pesky missionaries, the corrupt bureaucrats, and all the others who preyed on these people, grabbing their land, grabbing their lives, their pride, their wisdom, their magic, and leaving them picked clean like a Sunday dinner chicken breast. And then I pray. Then I pray as I run. I pray to myself. I pray to their God and to your God. I pray for all the lost souls, for the broken lives, for the wasted dreams of the Indians, of the railroaders, the black train porters, the dust bowlers, Mexican cowboys, and the waitress from back east, working her way to Hollywood. I pray for the fellow from New Delhi, plying his trade at the motel he bought with hard-earned money, proud to be a new American on Route 66. I pray for Suzanne, combing her hair, back in the room in El Rancho with a movie star's name on the door. I pray for the big Zuni man sleeping off a muscatel drunk, for smiling Armand Ortega in his wonderful piano. I pray for all of us on this fine morning, headed west on the Mother Road on Route 66. A taste from the west. And then there are those of you who came to this midpoint from the other side, from the old road back east, and you drove down here through the fine states of Illinois and Missouri and Kansas and Oklahoma. And like the Westerners gathered here, those of you who headed west to come here should not have been disappointed, because October on 66 in all of these states, especially in the Heartland, was about as good as it gets. And so to balance my Western prayer from Gallup, I want to just tell you a little short yarn from that country to the east of us, from back in Oklahoma, the heart and soul of Route 66 country. With all deference to these other fine states, as all of us know, there'd be no Route 66 without Oklahoma, where we still have 400, almost 400 strong miles. Now this story occurred during another Smithsonian tour just last year, just about a year ago, October, and we had a busload of intrepid and stalwart Smithsonian associates out on the old road, going with us all the way to Santa Monica. And one morning, after several days out on the road, we found ourselves on that very sweet stretch between Tulsa and Oklahoma City, on that stretch of road that was the road of the Jodes and of Pretty Boy Floyd and so many others. And they were fueled by a meal that was worth dying for, probably worth killing for, at the Rock Cafe in Stroud. And we were just outside Chandler. You know the spot. Some of you do. And I asked our trusty bus driver, Joe Shoulders, big brother Jim Shoulders, a world champion rodeo cowboy. I told him to ease that big tour bus over to the shoulder of the road. And then I told the tour participants to turn around in their seats. And there before them is that great restored and resplendent Merrimack Caverns painting that adorns a low tin shed perched on the road shoulder right up on that little hillock. And in a heartbeat, everybody was off the bus with cameras in hand. And I got off and I moseyed around outside with Suzanne in that October sunshine, and we were pleased as always to be able to present such a fine visual treat, a feast to our Smithsonian folks. And that's when I noticed one of our fledgling road warriors standing there all by himself, as still as a statue, and his name was Jim, and he was a 50-year-old man from Brooklyn, New York, and this trip on the Mother Road with us was the first time he was ever on ground that far west. He was a quiet man, sort of a nervous man, and he was prone to stutter and stammer when he spoke, and he wore thick glasses, thicker than Stanley Marsh glasses, thicker than Coke bottles, and he always had a neat row of ballpoints and a pen protector in his pocket, and he wore his pants up high, wore hush puppies, and he was a very predictable man. He's a man that played it safe all his life. You can tell that in one look at this man. He always played it safe. But his mother was from the Heartland. His mother was a native of Missouri, that fine state. And when she was a young woman, she'd married a New Yorker, and she moved there. And Jim had been born back east, and he had never lived anyplace else. But his mother had always told him about her part of the country and about where she came from and her life as a girl, and she made him promise her that someday he'd go back out there and he'd find out what her life had been all about before she moved to the big city. So this trip down Route 66 was not only the fulfillment of a dream for Jim, but it allowed him to keep a promise he made to his late mother. So now on this brilliant autumn day on Route 66 there, as I walked over to where Jim was standing, I could see he wasn't looking at that Merrimack Cavern sign, but he was staring intently below at this field, right below the building. And I knew what he was looking at because I just stopped at this field a few days earlier when I journeyed that way with my old road pal, some of you know him, Terrence Moore, the excellent Route 66 photographer, a man who's been like my brother since we met on the steep slopes above Santa Fe back in the turbulent 1960s. Terry and I had paused at this same spot just days before to photograph, so Terry could photograph that barn. And it was then that I looked down that field, and I found a big field of watermelon. Big watermelon. The last of the season just about petered out. It was a big field, spread all the way back into that tree line. And I went down there and I liberated one of those melons, and we enjoyed it that evening back in Tulsa. Had it again for breakfast in the morning with coffee. It's late in the season. Most of those melons were boiled. I rationalized no one would miss that particular melon. Besides, as every one of you should know, every son and daughter of the Mother Road knows, nothing in the world tastes better than forbidden fruit. And I knew Jim from Brooklyn was astounded by those melons he was looking at, and he was. I asked him, I said, if he had any notion of just how melons grew, and he admitted to me, he said, I do not. I didn't know if they grew on vines or on bushes or under the ground. He didn't know I have any inkling about watermelons. And I said to him then, I said, well, Jim, if that's the case, I venture to say, I dare to say, you probably never stolen a watermelon, have you? Well, this man was, I might as well have hit him in the chest with a 2x4. He was stunned and shocked, and he went to stammering, and he got out. He said, God, I've never even thought about stealing anything in my life. And I said, well, sir, that's fixing to change. And it did. You go down there and you pick you out a watermelon. And he did. I got enough of that old Sergeant E5 in me. He just went right down there. Perspiration glinting on his face. And he picked out a melon about the size of a sweet potato. And I said, no, that won't do. Don't get some little, get a good melon here. So he picked out a fairly good-sized melon. It was good. It looked right. It looked sweet, and he thumped on it. And he was just, it looked worthy of a resident of Flatbush back in New York. And he didn't know what to do. He was trembling down there, trying to stutter again. I said, just tear it from the land. Just break that stem, and you bring that melon up from that good Oklahoma earth. And he did it. And he cradled that big melon in his arms like it was a child. And as he was making his way out of the field on shaky legs of that road, back to that big tour bus, I couldn't have planned it any better. Here comes a car breezing down old 66. And it was the sheriff. Now, let me tell you, that old sheriff, he was oblivious to us and Jim and that melon. I had no doubt, Don, he was on his way down to the Rock Cafe himself, but I made the most of that scene, you know that. Jim, damn, watch out! Here comes the old high sheriff himself. Well, hide that melon and get him. And then I really wish you could have seen his face. I mean, it was sheer panic. He tucked that melon into his belly, and like an Oklahoma fullback, he raced for the security of Joe Shoulder's bus. He was trembling and shaking, but there was a smile melted over that man's face as wide as a big Texan steak. Of course, as soon as we got going westward again, cranking down the road, I got on the microphone. I let folks know we had a thief in our midst. I embarrassed the heck out of him, just like I like to do with my buddy Jim and all these other guys. That's all part of it, that humor. From then on, that Jim from Brooklyn became known as Billy the Kid. And everywhere he went, Grand Canyon, Grand Caverns, Angel's Barbershop, I always told him that this man was a thief and to watch it. And we sent him dishes and bowls of melon balls at breakfast, and I sent slices of melon to his room. I even bought him an old Kachina doll holding a watermelon out in Arizona. And at the end of the journey down to Santa Monica Pier, I gave him the biggest watermelon I could find in L.A. I said, now take that back to Brooklyn with you. But you know, the rest of that whole trip, after that warm October day in the melon patch on Route 66, we noticed a difference in Jim. He seemed more open. He seemed more outgoing. He didn't have that pen protector in his shirt anymore. He got sunburned. He got down and dirty a little bit. That stammer seemed to go away. He even got lucky, developed a friendship with a young widow who was on the tour. I understand they've gotten together a time or two since that trip. But most of all, what Jim did is he got some memories with him that day that tied him over until the next time, and there'll be a next time for him, he gets a chance to break free from the hustle and the bustle of the big city and escape to the countryside. And back in his apartment there in Brooklyn, I can see it in my mind's eye, a chunk of petrified wood, a Route 66 shield, that Kachina doll with the melon. And I know our Jim, our Billy the Kid, carries with him forever and always those simple, those dear memories that his mother wanted him to gather. The smell of raw soil, the feel, the taste, the caress of her land. There's a tried and true road warrior in Brooklyn today who knows the magic of this road. Best gifts of all, best gifts of all. Jim Wallis, our Brooklyn pal, like so many others, now knows what you know, what you've heard time and time again, but you gotta always hear it, that Route 66 has always meant going somewhere. 70 years ago, ever since 26, this old ribbon of asphalt and concrete back there has connected travelers to the fabric of this land. This isn't, what you heard up here from Melba today is not the political, God, they use those buzzwords, family values. This is real family values, and you don't have to put a name on it. You just know it, right? You don't have to go posturing in public, praying in public. You can pray 1,000,000 prayers to yourself on the Mother Road, all by yourself, on your Harley, in your Mustang, in your Toyota. No other highway has been so immortalized like this old road of ours, in song, and prose, and film. It offers us the sights and sounds of America at its best, sometimes at its worst. Black and white, shades of gray. And today, it invites all of us to revisit this country as it was before it became generic. It transports us back to the time when the landscape wasn't littered with cookie-cutter houses and those homogenized eateries and franchises and shopping malls peddling look-alike merchandise to people who look alike and smell alike. It's this road lore that we're passing down to John Padgett and his boys, and to Dawn and Christian and this new generation of 66ers that's being shared, that keeps the legend alive and lets them build on the legend. Why do you think all these people on the stage keep out here in the road? I mean, between all of us, if you pool it, we come up with a pretty average IQ. We're just good old boys and girls up here, but we're not, I'm proud to admit, we're not the dumbest people on earth either. Why do we keep coming out on the road? Well, there are some obvious reasons, but there are some really deep. It's because it keeps it, it's interesting. If it wasn't interesting, Bob Moore wouldn't keep coming out dragging European people up and down the road. Tom Teague wouldn't take time off to drive around talking to people. None of these people would. It's interesting. David, you wouldn't have driven over here from New Mexico today if it wasn't interesting. But every time we go out on the road, and I've been out here for 50 years as a kid, learned to drive on this road. This is where I first saw cowboys and Indians, right here, and ate enchiladas. I always see something new. I meet somebody new. I turn over a rock and some other creature comes out. That's the way the road is. And it's not up there on that damnable interstate. It's right there. It's on this layer down here. The Route 66 that I love, that you love, puts us in touch with ourselves and with our roots. A highway of phantom and dreams that reaches beyond a destination on a map. As you know, it just didn't appear overnight back in 26. It took a lot of years. Right through here, it took many years to build this road. Late 30s. First, only 800 miles or so was paved. But right here in this stretch, it was still dirt road. You heard some of those. I hope some of you were lucky to be in that tent and heard some of those great old timers yesterday talking about the building of the main street of America, talking about the years, the roaring 20s and the crash, and then that incredible incarnation that particularly draws me, the dirty 30s. We've endured a lot of history on this road, but those bittersweet 1930s when the nation's economy cracked and the rain stopped all the way through here. The rain stopped and there was drought and destruction throughout America's heartland. Many of you here can remember firsthand those stories, those terrible times. Or you're like me, you grew up hearing of those stories and you saw the indelible scars that were left on the land and the people. When bandits roamed the countryside, when banks failed, when people had to live in Hoovervilles, when they had to eat armadillos and just make a living, when they probably weren't even lucky to have a box of precious fine crystal to sell. And despite that fact, there were still cities that sported Art Deco palaces. You go back to that museum we opened last year in Clinton, and in that 30s room, there's that fine, opulent, affluent Art Deco mirror that represents Tulsa, the oil capital. And in that mirror, what do you see? You see that old jalopy, like that one, that the Jodes were on, with their lives packed on the back of that truck. Well, the highway was like that. The highway was like that. The highway was a mirror. It still is a mirror. And it's held up to us. It's held up to the nation. And sometimes Americans didn't like what they saw. And out of that reflection, a great migration resulted in tens of thousands of proud, resilient, staunch Okies and Arkies and tenant farmers and disenfranchised workers and vagabonds and migrants and dreamers turned to the highway. And they fled that tenant farm system and the choking, killing, dust, and the desolation, and they picked up and headed west to start a new life in California, and it became the road of safe passage to the promised land. This is when Woody Guthrie, a national treasure, crafted his most poignant ballads. And it's when John Steinbeck, whose name graces that sweet award I did win last night and appreciate, gave the highway yet another name. Maybe the best name of all, the Mother Road, in his immortal novel, The Grapes of Wrath. And I'd be almost sacrilegious to leave here today without giving you the classic Steinbeck quote. And I'm quoting the gospel according to Steinbeck here. Highway 66 is the main migrant road. 66, the long concrete path across the country, waving gently up and down on the map, from the Mississippi to Bakersfield, over the red lands and the gray lands, twisting up into the mountains, crossing the divide and down to the bright and terrible desert, and across the desert to the mountains again, and into the rich California valleys. 66 is the path of a people in flight, refugees from the dust and shrinking land, from the thunder of tractors and shrinking ownership, from the desert's slow northward invasion, from the twisting winds that howl up out of Texas, from the floods that bring no richness to the land and steal what richness is there. From all of these, the people are in flight, and they come into 66 from the tributary side roads, from the wagon tracks and the rutted country roads. 66 is the mother road, the road of flight. When those pilgrims, when your grandfathers and grandmothers, when your old neighbors from back in old Indian territory, from Arkansas, from Missouri, from the southern plains, when they reach those steep mountain grades, still there, steep as ever in Arizona, and they look down at that chocolate cover-colored Colorado River gurgling down there, and beyond the golden land called California, they did become almost euphoric. They were a lost tribe, and they could, even at that point, almost smell those sweet orange blossoms, the sea air, that fertile soil waiting for them just ahead. And then we had the 40s, and Route 66 paying its dues again with the war. And that's when the road reflected even more of the tension and the trials and the tribulations. And those hot prairie winds blowing misery may have ended, and the dust may have disappeared, but we still had tyrants to take on and the winds of war to face in Europe and the Pacific. And men and women and children managed to survive the Great Depression only to go around and face another test. And most of them rolled up their sleeves and didn't blink an eye. And with our entry into World War II, this highway became filled, clogged with troop convoys and hitchhiking GIs. And from the Great Lakes to the Pacific, we were transformed into a military highway. And in that blistering Mojave, not far from 66, old Patton Blood and Guts trained his desert warriors to fight the Nazi peril, ironically sending many of those enemy soldiers captured back home to prison camps at Shamrock and at Leonard Wood and El Reno. And at last, that terrible war in Europe and Pacific ended, and everybody came home to the bustling cities, to gasoline again, and tires, and paid vacations, and the road became filled. That was the year I was born. Some of you were born there. You were boomers, war babies, and you know what we're talking about. This was that great era that we longed for, at least the good parts of that era, and those years following the World War II through the 50s, when we continued our love affair with the road, and we worshiped those big gas-guzzling Detroit sleds, and we tore down the highway, and we knew that just the act of getting there, getting to Las Vegas, getting to the Grand Canyon, later on getting to Disneyland, getting up to the Great Lakes was part of the experience, and we didn't want to be gypped, we didn't want to be rooked, pardon the expression, out of a single moment of that experience on the road. And then during those turbulent 1960s, God, that was my good decade for us, because I had the yin and yang of it there, a period of social upheaval and unrest and protest, but we still considered Route 66 America's Main Street. Even though that legislation from the 50s was cranking and they were trying to bypass, they were bypassing. They were cutting off whole towns and leaving behind. But yet in the 60s we had that generation, those children of the 60s, inspired by Kerouac and his saga of youth adrift in America and by other things. And some of us were in colorful tie-dyed clothing and wore our hair long. Others appeared in military uniforms with GI haircuts. Some of us were like me, I was both. First one, then the other. Going through all kinds of turmoil and growth within myself, as was the country. And like any good family, we had our yips and yaps at each other, and some of them took place right out here on 66. But no matter what side you were on, or if you were a good Libra and tried to balance down the middle, you knew you were part of a generation that was driven by a different beat. We moved to those new sounds, to those stirring hymns that called for change, to electric rock and roll, to roaring engines. And by the late 60s, Mildred and Maharis were long gone. That unpopular war raged on, and some of our country's best ever social and political leaders had been senselessly gunned down. And it became apparent that nothing would ever be the same again in this country. But yet the old guard on 66 vigorously defended this highway's place and fought on for the importance of this highway on the cultural scene, even though they knew that change was coming, and it did come through the 60s into those desolate 70s, the coming of the interstate, slow and laborious but steady, new road construction, 5 new interstates to try to take the place of 66, all of these places cut off by the super slab, and all the while some of the real road warriors who are with us here in spirit today, Jack Cutbirth, those folks fighting on out of his basement office to keep the Mother Road alive. And then in '84, that last stretch bypassed at Williams, and everybody cheering and clapping for what they called progress, but not everyone cheered. We all didn't cheer. Bobby Troop wept. I wept. I'm sure Teague wept. I'm sure Moore wept. I'm sure everybody wept to themselves. I hope you wept, because it wasn't progress. And we vowed that the Mother Road wouldn't die, and it obviously hasn't. And you see the results. The Mother Road didn't disappear. Those of us, those of you who truly love, who appreciate this old road and everything it stands for and everything it can stand for in the future, know that would never happen. They could take down the shields, they could cut off the towns, they could try to make us forget, but they couldn't destroy 66. Long, good, sweet stretches of it remain, stronger than ever. The new life is there in this old road. But above all else, Route 66 is a part of America that I think has always offered us real, solid testimony to where we've been, what remains of our past, what we want to cherry pick from our past. And it shows us what I like to call, and we're in one of them here, the little secret corners, the hidden towns that you can still find if you dare to just do one small thing. And I've told this to the Smithsonian people, I told it to our Harley riders this summer, and they picked up the chant, they picked up the mantra, and you see it right here before you. In order to enjoy this, in order to find it, in order to find that liberty, you have to merely dare to exit the interstate. Because life begins right there at the off-ramp. That's where it begins. That's what you've got to do. So you do that on your way home. Use the damn old super slab to your advantage, but get off every once in a while and take in those long vestiges. And when you do that, shut off the air conditioner. Roll down those windows and open your eyes to the past. And maybe, just maybe, you'll discover something of yourselves. We're going to have a good day today, folks. And I look forward to meeting every last one of you. Happy birthday, 66.